Welcome, modern day mystics, fellow truth seekers. Today we're going to be reacting to a video titled Islamic Golden Age, Philosophy and Humanities. Now this is done by the Kings and Generals YouTube channel. I think this will be helpful.
Is this talking about a past golden age or a golden age to come?
Past golden age. Okay. So we're going to look into the past, get a little bit of a history lesson here, and hopefully learn something.
All right.
Today, the religion of Islam boasts almost 2 billion followers. Still, the faith itself comes from humble origins. Islam began as a religious movement turned small nation, then empire in the Arabian Peninsula in the 7th century. Then a sprawling multi-ethnic, multicultural, and even multi-religious country at the crossroads of Eurasian trade and cultural exchange. It's no surprise then that the ideas, cultures and people moving through the Islamic Empire, combined with a friendly theology and government, led to what's called the Islamic Golden Age. This series will discuss the contributions made to humankind in this period, a time of massive developments in science, philosophy and medicine. Today we're going to look at the humanities and social sciences, as well as explain how this Golden Age came to be. One major factor in how the Islamic Empire enjoyed such a blossoming of thought comes from Islam itself. Somewhat unusually, many parts of the Islamic holy texts, the Quran and the Hadiths, place value on education and scientific discovery, regardless of the information's origin. Muslim scholars did not, by and large, take issue with learning from the works of non-Muslims to advance their body of knowledge. A Muslim scholar by the name of Burhan al-Din proclaimed that education should be prescribed for everyone, a novel idea for the Middle Ages. Muslims would enjoy a high literacy rate due to their emphasis on learning and education as part of a well-lived life. Schools would not only give kids a good grasp of Islamic law and analysis, but bring young scholars from different classes and backgrounds together to share ideas. In a state as large and diverse as the Islamic Empire, this led to a lot of cross-pollination of ideas. Later in the Golden Age, this process of education was formalized by schools known as madrassas. They were mosques, boarding houses and libraries in a single compound. Some of these became the first universities to give out degrees. Additionally, the Muslim Empire invested massively in the work of scientists and philosophers. The amount the government spent in translation was massive, rivaling some of the research budgets of our times. The symbol of this period would be the Great House of Wisdom in Baghdad, a massive library built by the Islamic Emperor Caliph al-Mansur. The House of Wisdom is so fundamental to the Islamic Golden Age that its construction and obliteration are viewed as the start and end of it. It was one of the world's biggest assortments of rare books in Persian and Arabic. The engine at the heart of this fast growing Golden Age was the translation movement. The Islamic Empire in most of its domain contained 10% or fewer Muslims, and very few spoke Arabic. As they expanded into the Sasanian Empire, they found a large class of Persian scholars, as well as Greek academics who left the Byzantine Empire. The Caliphate connected them into a vast network of trade and information, but also added Arabic into the linguistic stew. Much of the information coming into the empire was in Persian, Greek or Arabic, but could also be in Latin, Chinese or any number of written languages from around Eurasia at the time. Scientific advancement aside, if the Caliphate wanted to function as an empire, it needed an army of translators to keep the flow of information running. When it made Baghdad its new imperial capital, the elites were inspired by Persian and Hellenistic ideas. It drove a desire to learn more from the classical Greeks. Furthermore, in the aftermath of the Battle of Talas in 751, the empire captured several Chinese prisoners of war. What might seem like a banal event turned out to be one of the most important breakthroughs, as it allowed for the translation movement and possibly the whole Golden Age. These prisoners knew how to make paper, which could make books easier than vellum or parchment. The first significant translation projects included taking Islamic holy texts like the Quran and translating them into various languages to spread Islam around the empire and the world. Furthermore, the classical works of the ancient Greeks and Persian texts were translated into Arabic, which would become a new lingua franca around the empire. Proficiency in Arabic allowed for a language between cultures. One particularly gifted linguist translated well over 100 works by famous authors like Galen and Hippocrates. In cases like the work of Aristotle, the Arabic translations are how the work even survived to modern day. Places like the House of Wisdom had extensive translation departments, with subject experts ready to work on pieces. These experts came from all over the empire, and many were Zoroastrians and Christians working with Muslims. Once a work was translated, they made several copies for distribution, using scribes with especially good handwriting. This movement is the work that kept the Western canon preserved. With that established, now we can look into the social sciences and the humanities, which in the Middle Ages is just philosophy. The social sciences were a long way off from being formalized. However, a man by the name of Ibn Khaldun, who lived during the Islamic Golden Age, is often considered the founder of many social sciences like demography, economics, historiography, and sociology. Ibn Khaldun was an upper-class Tunisian scholar. Due to the status of his family, he received a top-tier classical Islamic education. This education would include Arabic, Quran and Hadith studies, and law and jurisprudence study. He also successfully underwent the tasks to become a Hafiz, which is a torturous process very few Muslims do, to memorize the entire Quran. On top of this education, he learned maths, philosophy, and classical logic. But Ibn Khaldun didn't get into all of his social science work until after he finished a successful career as a politician in particularly unstable times in Tunisia. In the last years of his life, he penned an autobiography as well as a world history book called the Kitab al-Ibar, or the Book of Lessons. To this day, the book's chapters on the history of North African Berber people are still used as a source. In the book, he speaks of two different walks of life, both common in North Africa of his day, that of nomadic and sedentary peoples. He wrote of the effects of the conquest of a city on its inhabitants. Both are based on a central concept called asabia, or social cohesion.
You ready for the big exam?
I think it's easy to kind of like undermine some of the things that have been said here as like, oh, it's trivial, you know, that, but I think cultures like this that laid the foundation for like university style, you know, when you're the first, you know, wherever you come from, someone had to start it, and like look at how it was able to, you know, educate across such a vast area. But on a different note, the thing that I just came to me was just the idea of like who determines what is part of a golden age? Because for me, like what's important for me may not be exactly important for you. Like when I think of like a golden age, I think in a day where you don't have to sweat worrying about, you know, food and shelter, and you've got safety. These are things that I would, you know, throw into the camp of like, you know, living in a golden age where there's a strong sense of stability.
And you think that other people might not agree with that?
Well, so far I haven't seen that in this. For me, what I've seen in this video seems to be pointing towards like the spread of Islam, the growth and education and expansion of education, and people being, you know, they had that house there of wisdom, and of course it's destroyed. I was like, as soon as they mentioned it, I was like, please don't say it was destroyed. Please don't say it was destroyed. Destroyed. So, you know, it seems that, because that's not the only place where houses of wisdom have been destroyed. There's like libraries, I think in India, like, you know, famous libraries that have been burned to the ground.
Iron sharpens iron, and it's nice to, sometimes it can be annoying, but there's a secret gift in somebody that's constantly contradicting what you're saying. Yeah. But I've brought this up in the midst of such people many times, and I go, wouldn't it make sense to reverse engineering? Like, because I'm latching on to the point where you say, well, what's important to me? What I would explain as a golden age wouldn't necessarily be what somebody else did. I'm like, well, then in that situation, I would say, start at what is most common. It's like, what's the very first thing? Go to the practice test question and be like, is breathing important to everybody? Without like some smart ass in the back being like, actually, I know somebody that doesn't breathe. Like, no, I'm saying as general as we can get, we'll start there and be like, okay, everybody wants breath. What else does everybody want? They want food. What else does everybody? And as long as we can be fair about that and everybody gets the base things, and then it's like, now we can start discussing some of the things where we differ. And even within those micro things, try to find some generalities, try to like discuss and find.
Yeah.
But at the time, it was the Dark Ages, right? Dark. It was dark back then. You know what I mean? That sounds like a stupid thing to say, but I'm just trying to illustrate, like, they didn't even have the capacity and the luxury, the entitled things we have now to have like safe discourse. Might is right was the theme that dominated like most of human history up to now. Like, how about if you don't do what I say, I'll just enslave you? Yeah. How's that for an answer for you?
Yeah.
And we're finally at an age where you can kind of like civil discourse is allowed, and we actually are free to be open. And we talk to people on the show all the time with different beliefs, but we can talk. Yeah. And it's like great. And they're like, I'm going to stick with my traditions that I've grown up with, but we can have open discourse and everybody learns. They're like, they learn, we've been talking to people before and they're like writing stuff I've said down and I'm changing. And we're like, that guy we interviewed recently, I was like, I'm going to go read some Rumi. Yeah, and I did. I didn't read it. I was in the gym and watching videos on Rumi. I was careful not to be like, I'm going to go get a book even when he said it. But I was like, I am going to pay more attention to what Rumi said.
Yeah.
And that's like Rumi was like Islamic, right?
Yeah, part of the Sufi branch.
Yeah. And so I'm saying we're there now.
Yeah.
And it would have been real tough, but I'm saying in terms of a golden age for us all, if we want to repeat that in the future, let's start with what we agree on to keep the attitude in the room one of agreement.
Yeah. And
then when it gets to the stickier, more tricky stuff, even there, we try to find where we can actually connect and what we agree on going from there. Yeah. You know what I mean? And we have respect for people that have got different things and try to hear them out and try to acquiesce as much as we can so that there's not opportunity so much for like carnal violence. It's like there's a lot of stuff we've left behind. Yeah. If you're going to go, well, you're never going to get certain things out. I go, are you sure? Because by and large, there's a lot of stuff we left behind. We left behind making every single fire with sticks and rocks. Yeah. We did leave that behind. There is some guy out there that specializes in stick and rock fires, but most of us have moved on.
Yeah.
And so it's okay to leave certain things in the past, and it's okay to embrace new things if it's in the heart of unity, in the heart of like what most of us can agree are good, and then we be considerate of people that are a little different.
Yeah. All right, we'll continue on to the end and then we'll see you there.
It might seem rudimentary, but this is considered some of the first works of sociological research. As he broke down the concept, he spoke of social factors leading to economic, political, and even psychological differences in cultures. This type of work would not see serious scholarly development until the 19th century. When discussing economics, it appears Ibn Khaldun is responsible for developing the labor theory of value, a central concept of economics even today. Ideas like economic growth, taxation, and GDP are centuries ahead of their time, if not a millennium. Lastly, he made a strict bifurcation of what he called the non-religious sciences and the religious sciences. It was an attempt to settle a significant debate between those who wanted to focus on science and philosophy, and scholars who promoted a mystic understanding of Islamic theology. Where the humanities shined, however, was in philosophy. Islamic philosophy in this age subscribed to one of two major currents. The first was Kalam, which focused more on questions to do with theology. This featured discussions about free will and rationality. One sect which took a rigorous adherence to rationality as the proper way to understand questions of theology were the Mutazilites. They in turn debated with any other schools, such as Maturidiyya, which did not see the hadiths as reliable texts at odds with reason, and largely believed in free will. Another major theological school was the Ash'ari, whose concepts of free will were limited to choosing possibilities outlined for you by an all-knowing God. Much of the logic and discussions these currents had with each other spoke of heavy influence from Greek philosophers. One medieval theologian, Ibn Taymiyyah, even described many of these discussions as Greek solutions to Greek problems, which should never have concerned Muslims in the first place. Ibn Taymiyyah's criticism speaks to another significant theological divergence in Islamic philosophy. All of these schools used reasoned approaches to Islam, and as such, rejected literalist interpretations. This did not go unopposed by some in the clergy, who worried that this kind of thinking challenged their status in society. However, the remnants of Kalam scholars still have a significant presence in the Islam of today. Kalam is now merely the word for theology, and Islamic theology is still very academic. The second major school of philosophy is what we might more easily recognize as philosophy today. Even at the time, they borrowed the word philosophy from Greek and called this school falsafa. These were the scholars who discussed and built upon the works of Aristotle, Pythagoras, and Plato, publishing massive commentaries and philosophical texts. Some of these scholars were responsible for introducing their ideas, as well as those of the Greeks and Hindus, into Western Christian thought. This transfer of knowledge is one of the main reasons Aristotle went on to play such a significant role in Christian theology. One philosopher, Ibn Sina, broke ground in the realm of metaphysics. Metaphysics is the area of philosophy which attempts to understand the fundamentals of reality, the study of objects, properties, and existence itself. One major schism when it comes to the prominent Greek philosophers of Aristotle and Plato was a debate about forms. The form, or essence of something, is what makes an object fundamentally that sort of thing, its shape, highlights, and so forth. A triangle is a triangle because it has 3 sides, as a basic example. Plato believed that all things, even abstract things, existed in a world of forms, where the perfect idea of a thing exists. What we see are mere shadows of that thing. Aristotle rejected this idea, opting to believe that an object's form existed in this world, and that all objects were made of both object and form. Ibn Sina wanted to marry these two ideas in an exploration of the soul, and also to prove the soul exists. He did so with a thought experiment. It's a famous one from philosophical history, the floating man. In this, he wants to imagine a man falling freely in the air. With no ability to see other things in reference to oneself, a person could still experience their presence and consciousness. Ibn Sina believed this to be evidence that there is a soul, which is immaterial within, showing both external properties but also of another plane, attempting to marry the two concepts. This idea is very similar to the famous starting point for Descartes, who centuries later would become famous for his line "Cogito ergo sum," I think, therefore I am. In the realm of epistemology, the philosophical work of understanding knowledge, learning, and understanding, philosophers worked to understand the human mind. For the sake of this video, let's discuss one back and forth in the realm of the story of self-education, also known as autodidactism. Arab philosopher Ibn al-Nafis, to explore the idea of how one might learn without any other humans, wrote a philosophical novel called Theologus Autodidactus. This novel was a first on many fronts, founding many literary mainstays. It was one of the first Arabic language novels ever made. It had a coming-of-age story long before that was to become a popular theme. It took place on a desert island, of which it may have been one of the first examples. It even had elements of the apocalypse and explaining the afterlife with astronomy, biology, and theology, which have led some historians to consider it a very early inkling of what would become science fiction. The novel itself is about a boy who spontaneously came to life on a desert island and meets castaways who wind up on his home. Ibn al-Nafis wrote the main character, Kamil, to be a complete human blank slate in which to observe the world. It's about how an uninitiated person comes to find the necessity of God, Islam, and rationality. The character then explores the sciences and philosophy. It's not a page-turner, but it acted as an essay to explore many different ideas about the world Ibn al-Nafis knew about as a polymath. It was a response to a desert island book called Hay ibn Yaqdan, which itself was a response to the incoherence of the philosophers. They were interested in which aspects of rational thought and belief came innately from the human mind, and which had been learned. Theologus Autodidactus and Hay ibn Yaqdan both featured feral children who explored their various ideas on it. These philosophers would have massive impacts on philosophers throughout the centuries. Ibn Sina, mentioned earlier, is often called in the West Avicenna and is one of the greats. Averroes or Ibn Rushd, as well as Al-Farabi, Al-Ghazali and Al-Kindi are all some of the most revered philosophers in the history of ideas. Their work influenced how Western Christians came to conceive of God, the ways they argued his existence, and conceptions of the soul. The translation projects brought the Greco-Roman philosophical works to the West, where they otherwise might not have been preserved. It's tough to conceive of Western civilization without the contributions of the Muslim philosophers of the Islamic Golden Age.
All right, so that is actually kind of just an introduction video. I'll leave a link in the description for that video, but if you go to the YouTube channel, it sounds like there's a lot more videos that kind of expand upon the Islamic Golden Age. So for those of you who out there who are interested in it, maybe we'll come back and even take a look there. Interesting to see how other religions were kind of allowed in the area and they kind of played off of each other. And I think that allows for growth. I think, to me, that time period seemed like a lot of people were sharing their ideas, whether they agreed with each other or not. Who knows? That painted a very pretty picture, because sometimes when you're, throwing out your philosophies and your ideas, it's not always as calm and cool and collected. How much fighting was going on during all of that, right? That wouldn't just be in Islam, be anywhere in the world where you've got conflicting philosophies. Wouldn't it be cool to find that?
Wouldn't that be enlightening if it was like, and then one time in the hall there was it got violent. Two guys started wrestling with each other or something. It would just be interesting. Maybe it never did happen, and that would be fine too.
Yeah, but you see the premium on logic. We've done a lot of Islamic reactions here, and there's this very logic-based thing. There's a premium on logic, and you can see it tied here to their past, how they came up with an idea here. The last thing I'll say before I let you close it out would be that I would hope that in the modern age that we're in now, that all religions, including Islam, could continue to have these open discourses and still philosophize, bounce crazy, wacky ideas off each other until things make sense.
It's the way everything's going, and don't get me wrong. I'll say thank you to the people that share their knowledge and the epistemology of their mindset and everything like that, and for sharing the information, for it to be out there for anyone to come across and be educated in. So thank you to the people that share information. But it's also the way of the world's going, I don't know that it'll make it people that sort of try to covet what they know. I don't know that that'll be conducive to this world that seems to really want to explore pollination with each other and sharing ideas. It just seems to be something like a sign of where we're going and a sign of a thriving race. One thing I'd say is, that example of the falling guy thing?
Yeah.
I would have liked them to go a step further and go, all right, that's pretty good already. You got a falling guy with he can't perceive anything. Is he still there?
Yeah.
But I take a little bit of an issue with I think, therefore I am. I'm like, that's another thought. What if that fallen guy didn't have a body? What if he didn't have arms or fingers to reference? What if he had no words to reference? Then what is he?
Yeah.
When you get down to just nothing but utter consciousness, no content there, then what are we dealing with? Is the answer still a thing? It's just a question to chew on.
Yeah. Hey, and you may be able to explore that in some of the more mystical sides of Islam. But anyway, we'll close this out. Hopefully you guys enjoyed our reaction here. If you did, don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, share this with a friend, and everyone till next time. Stay spiritual.